Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on festivals, books, trails, gear, and more. This podcast is airing on Friday, May the 16th. And that's 2025 if you're listening to this on whatever you listen to podcasts on in the 22nd century. And if you're interested, the 16th of May is Pizza Party Day, Barbecue Day, NASCAR Day, Bike to Work Day, and Do Something Good for Your Neighbour Day. I mentioned this to our neighbour and she said, "Oh, are you moving?" I suppose there's a connection to walking because it's also Love a Tree Day. And there are plenty of others. You know you're getting older when you look at all the famous people with birthdays today and you don't know who any of them are. Last week my son and I started filming on the series we're aiming to do related to a long distance path here in Scotland. I never thought I'd be happy to see shade. You tend not to associate Scotland and heat, but it was warm, although I guess everything's relative, because when we lived in the southwest of the US, 22 Celsius would have been a very cold winter night. Funny how when we moved there from Canada the first winter, we were in t-shirts, and the second winter we were in coats. It was always the easiest way to tell who the locals were. Anyway, the walk we did last weekend was great, lots of flowers out, good scenery, and a lot of fun. When you're filming it does take time, so I think we averaged less than 2 miles per hour because of all the stopping and starting. That and carrying a tripod, 4 cameras, a drone, microphones and other bits of equipment. It gets heavy. We did get 1 or 2 strange looks, but I think people are quite used to vloggers and people appearing to talk to themselves these days. In the first town we passed, which is quite touristy, there were indeed a lot of tourists and several people filming themselves. You always kind of look at their techniques, some of which are a bit odd or counterproductive, or at least in my eye, but I think anything goes these days. I remember when I was in a band and we played a festival once, there was a young band playing first, and the drummer wasn't great. He was having a really hard time because he'd clearly never had any lessons or figured out how to set up a kit because it was set up all wrong. So after their set, I tried to offer him some friendly advice, but in return got a torrent of abuse and who do you think you are kind of response. That was until they saw us close the event and he realised I kind of knew what I was talking about. And after that he became a student for a couple of lessons before he then decided he was the best drummer in North America and didn't need any more assistance. I'm not quite sure how I got from a Scottish long-distance path to drumming in Canada, so let's get back on track, or on trail maybe. Last week on the podcast we had 2 festival interviews, one about the Wirral Walking Festival and the other about the Wrexham Walking Festival. It's great that there are so many walking festivals, but it also highlights just how little of the country I've actually explored. I've been to both of those places before, but when you're local you really know the place and the walks and all the things to see and do. Sounds obvious, but it is great to learn about new places. I was going to try and build up the interviews and be all mysterious, but then I realised if you've read the title before listening to the podcast, then it's not really much of a reveal. Reminds me of a concert we did once, and it was an outdoor show with about 500 people there. And when we took our break, they did the draw for all of the prizes. And when we got back, there were maybe 30 people left. So this week we have 1 walking festival interview, and that's on Otley in Yorkshire. And the other is an interview with the author Ursula Martin, who followed up her book One Woman Walks Wales with another book, One Woman Walks Europe. You really don't want to miss either of these conversations. But then I would say that. Of course, first we give you a quick recap of some of this week's articles on WalkingPost.com. And if you have news, press releases, guest ideas or comments, please do get in touch via walkingpost.com, or you can just email me at jim@walkingpost.com. So it's time for a brief look at some of the headlines of the news articles we had on walkingpost.com this week. 9 Waltham Forest groups have been awarded grants for walking and cycling projects. Australia is going to host the 2026 World Trails Conference, and it will be in Perth. And the online walking app, All Trails, which many of you may have, is expanding its membership options with a new product called All Trails Peak. Bolsover has launched a walking and cycling app, and if you're going to do the Coast to Coast Trail from St Bees to Robin Hood's Bay, you can now buy a passport to get stamped. It looks really good and it has discounts and all kinds of good information, as well as room for your stamps. And hopefully we will have an interview about that in the next couple of weeks. I'm sure if I do the walk, my passport will be annulled or I'll be deported. One of the best known trails in Canada, the Bruce Trail in Ontario, is being expanded with an addition to the Bruce Trail Corridor. And the WHO is pushing for safer walking. That's the World Health Organization, not Roger Daltrey. Anyway, you can read all of these articles and many more at walkingpost.com. Okay, let's move on to this week's interviews after me talking too much. The first one this week is about a walking festival in a place I actually do know something about, as it's the Otley Walking Festival. And as my first university was Leeds in the 80s, it's an area I used to go walking in quite a bit. So I really enjoyed the conversation with Ruth Blackwell, chair of the Otley Walking Festival Committee. Could you maybe give me a bit of background on the area and, what there is for walking in the area?
So Otley's about 10 miles from Leeds, a similar distance from Bradford, and about 8 miles from Harrogate. It's in Wharfedale in Yorkshire. Otley's a small market town, medieval origins. Parts of the old town layout are still here. We've got a lot of 17th century, 18th century buildings. It's a very beautiful part of Yorkshire. There's moors above the towns. There's meadows and fields everywhere. You can walk out of your door. One of the things I really like about Otley is you can step out of your door and immediately go onto a footpath that takes you either up to the north, to the south, east or west. So you can follow the river, which runs through Otley, east or west. You can head south and climb up the Chevin, which is a big escarpment above our town, or you can head north and up towards the moors. We're about 8 miles from Ilkley, so within about 20 minutes walk, we can get up onto the moors and head across the moors to the famous Ilkley Moor, with or without our hats, depending on the weather. Fabulous walking country. And I used to live in Leeds, which is 10 miles away, and I always thought to get a good walk, you've got to head right out into the Dales. What I didn't realise when I moved to Otley is it's in the Dales. It's only 10 miles from Leeds. It's in the Dales and there's fabulous walks from the doorstep. So I love it here. I've always been a big city person. So coming to a small market town of about 18,000 people was quite a shock. But I've been here now nearly 30 years. I love it and the walking is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that whole area, it's almost like a calendar everywhere you go.
Oh, it certainly is. And every season's got its own joy, its own interest, because quite often you think walking in the winter is going to be dull. And then you look at the bare trees and you can see the snow on it. You can see the clear skies and the skeleton trees. So each season, I think, has got something. But the flowers around here, I've noticed this year when I've been out walking, the flowers are just absolutely beautiful. The scents, the bluebells at the moment are just amazing. You can see that purple haze in the woods and smell the beautiful light scent of the bluebells. And it's so fleeting. It only lasts a couple of weeks. And I've been very lucky to get it this year.
The festival, how long's that been going and how's that changed?
Right, okay. The festival started as a one-off millennium event for the year 2000, and we're very tentative about it. In Otley, we've got something called the Otley Town Partnership, which is a partnership between the local councillors, local business, and the community. And was one of the representatives from the community on it. And one of the areas it wanted to looking at how to regenerate Otley and how to market it, was to actually have some people, a small working party, of which I was one, to look at how you could market Otley as a destination. And we looked at various things like beer festivals, food festivals, this, that, and the other, walking festivals. And I'd seen walking festivals in other areas of Yorkshire that had worked really well, and thought, well, hey, we've got fantastic walking areas around here. We've got a really good network of paths. 10 minutes from the moors. We've got the river. We've got lots of things going on around here. So why don't we try and do a walking festival? Well, there were 4 of us. The idea was taken up. We were tasked with doing it. This was in 1998 for the year 2000. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had meetings every fortnight. We had to find out, well, how do you do it? Oh, you need insurance. How do you get that? We needed a leaflet. What do we do? What style is it? We were going around all sorts of tourist information centres looking at their leaflets. Anyway, it took us almost 2 years to get the money together. We didn't know how much it was going to cost. We didn't really know what to do, but we learned a hell of a lot in that time and used local connections for people to offer walks. So I think the first walking festival, we'd got about 27, 28 walks. This year we've got 56. So we've got about 37 walk leaders now. So that's how it started. The first one was successful. We weren't really sure, is it going to happen? What will people turn up? But yes, they did. And people were saying in the festival, this is a fantastic idea. You're going to do it again? Oh, no. Are we? Because it was run on a shoestring. We had just enough money to pay for the leaflets and to pay for the insurance. That was it. And we had a raffle on the last day where the 4 of us, plus 1 or 2 other people, donated a bottle of wine each to get a bit of extra money to pay other costs like postage and so on. So we just got enough. We got no money left over. And then, are you going to do it again? Are we? Anyway, thought, well, yeah, why not? Give it a go. The council gave us a small amount of money and helped out. So that was good. And we got sponsorship. The next year, 2001, was foot and mouth, so we couldn't run it. Fallow year. But by then we were slightly old hands, I think, and it came back with a bang in the year 2002. And what I found is that the walk leaders, you might think it's difficult to get them. So there's a core of people who are keen and, come and lead the walks every year. But then each year, if you're on a walk, you get people coming up and saying, well, I could lead a walk on wildflowers. Would you be interested? Oh, yes. Give me your email address. Give me your contact details. Or somebody might say, well, this is my favourite walk's this. And I think, let's put it in the festival. So we've grown quite a lot, and people know a lot more about it and will actually come up and say, would you like a walk on? So, for example, there's been walks on history of local churches. There's been walks on, we've got the 4 pubs walk, always popular. Walks on all sorts of interests that you just wouldn't think about. So, for instance, there's a walk, and it might sound a bit parochial, a bit small, the allotment walk. Here in Otley, we've got 5 different sets of allotments. People love going around those allotments. It's amazing. I've done it 2 or 3 times with other people leading it. And it's good fun going around the allotments. And it's always amazing what people have done in their allotments. But you wouldn't believe it. It's incredibly popular. About 40 to 50 people turn up to go around the allotments. They're not all snooping. It's just out of interest. So, you think, and then there's another one. We've got 2 Morris sides or Morris teams in Otley. They do a Ways Goose Weave. Now, the team is called the Ways Goose, Morris side, and they dance outside various pubs, and we walk round and follow them. And again, great fun. And the other things that have been happening is some of the long distance walks have now come in. There's something here called the Six Dales Trail, which was developed, about 15 years ago. And it goes from Otley north to Middleham. It's now a national trail. And one of our walk leaders, Stuart Files, he leads that every year. So each year they go do that over 3 days. They have a minibus to take them and pick them up. So one year it goes from Otley to Middleham. which is where Richard the second or third lived. There's an old castle up there, so people love seeing that. And every other year they walk back from Midland to Otley. They book up on it as soon as it goes on the website.
Where do you get people from? I would imagine being so close to Leeds and Bradford, that's a big draw. But
I would say about 2/3 of the people come from the local area, so Leeds, Bradford, Harrogate, Ilkley. But the furthest we've had is somebody who comes every year from Tenerife. He is a Yorkshireman, I think, but lives out in Tenerife, comes back to visit family, always comes to the festival, loves it, does other walking festivals in England, and has said consistently that ours is the best organised festival. A lot of people come from down south. We get a lot of people from Lancashire. So that other third are people from all over the UK, quite a few from the south. Where else? Cornwall, Lancashire. And I think what's interesting now in England, walking festivals seem to have taken off. And what people often do is say, well, I'd like to go to that part of the country. So I'd like to go to Yorkshire. I've got this week off work. Let's have a look online. Are there any walking festivals? I love walking, etc. Or they might say, I've got a week. I want to walk. Let's see what's on in that week and go to that particular area. So I think that's now a trend. And of course, it's a lot cheaper for people to do that than to say to go on an organised walking holiday with a company where everything's provided.
And I would imagine that because of all of those places that are fairly close by, finding accommodation if you are coming from away is easy.
Otley's got various pubs that do rooms. There's 2 large hotels within striking distance. There's 2 campsites. So there is accommodation. We have got it on the website. It's not overflowing with accommodation, but people do seem to find somewhere. And there's a few B&Bs in the area and Airbnbs, of course, as well. So people do tell us where they stay. And that's how we've got to learn about the Airbnbs and the local B&Bs and so on.
And transport's fairly good around that area as well.
Yeah. We've got good bus connections to the major towns. We're also 10 minutes by bus from the local railway station, which goes into Leeds, Bradford, Ilkley. So you can get everywhere.
Do you change up the walks every year?
Oh, yeah. Always. There are some old favourites. So the Six Sails Trail, which is this 38-mile national trail from Otley to Middleham, that always comes in each year. Things like the allotment walk, which is popular. But mostly, no, new ideas come each year. I'm always amazed by the ideas that walk leaders come up with. It's just humbling and also amazing. So as I say, we've got 57 walks this year, and they range from walks on the moors to, for instance, we've got a poetry walk in our local wetlands here in Nature Reserve. We've got a walk with no stiles, different pub walks. We've got meanders on top of the Chevin, which is the big open forest area here. Early birds in the wetlands. We've got walks all over the area. We've got some history walks. So there's a local character in history, the Timble Man, and also the Timble Witches. There's a walk about their history on the moors above Otley. There's also a guided walk about children who used to work in the mills near here. So around Otley, there was, because of the river systems and the climate, there were several mills, and children were brought here, as people probably know, as orphans to work in the mills. And some of them had obviously very dangerous and hard lives. And there's a history walk about that. I did it last year with the walk leader. It's fascinating. You take part of the child and you walk through where that child would have worked, where they lived, what happened to them. Sadly, my one died. I died. So it really is an amazing mix. People just say, would you like a walk on this? We're not prescriptive. We don't say we've got to have certain kinds of walks. So if people want to do a walk, and they are always interesting and always popular.
Are there costs associated with the walks?
No. We're one of the few walking festivals who's got the principle that walking should be free. So all walks are free, apart from 3. All walks out of the 57 are free. There's one where you've got to pay for a minibus, and 2 where you're paying for a meal or an entry into, in this case, the local old Georgian hall near here. But otherwise, they're all free at point of contact. One of our founding principles is that people should be able to walk without having to pay. So we don't want to disadvantage people.
Yeah,
We do ask if they can to make a donation towards the running costs, because the costs now have become much more expensive. They're about £2,000 to run it now, with the cost of insurance, leaflets, other things that we have to pay for. But we do ask people for donations, and people are very generous. So they can make a donation online or with the walk leader.
Do you have limits on the numbers for each walk? I mean, do you have to book online? Or?
About half you have to book online. So some of the walk leaders need to limit the number of people because of the terrain they're going through, or just to manage it. So the history walks, for example, this one about the Timble Man and Timble Witches only has 18 people. They book online. All the others, no, just turn up and go. So we like to have a mix, so that on a particular day, if a walk's not booked, or you've not booked a walk, you can look and think, oh yeah, there's a walk that I can do without having to book. Because for a lot of people, it'll depend on the weather, won't it?
What are some of your favourite walks around Otley?
There's a lovely walk over the tops from Otley up to a medieval village called Clifton, with beautiful old houses in it. So I always find that attractive. Over the fields, over the meadows, up to Clifton, and then over the tops to Ilkley. And it's absolutely beautiful. You've got the moors there on both sides of the valley. You've got fantastic views. You've got the curlews. You've got the wildflowers. It's just amazing. You can see so far. And I would say that's one of my favourites. And the other favourite walk is a walk along the river heading west, again to a little village of Leithley, and beyond there, and you can walk through up to somewhere called Armscliff Crag. So it's about probably about 12 miles round trip. You can shorten it by getting the bus back though. But fabulous views everywhere. You're walking by the river, you're going through the old villages, you're crossing streams, you're going up through a little bit of a forest, riff of woods, and then up and up and up, and you've got these great views opening out, looking towards Harrogate. So you can actually see sometimes as far as York Minster. So it is absolutely amazing. I love it. And then you can come back down, either call in a cafe or a pub and get the bus back, or walk back along by the river. So again, a great favourite.
And I guess nobody's getting paid to run this event?
We're all volunteers. It's a true community event because we're all volunteers that run it. We're all volunteers that lead the walks or run the events in it. Nobody makes any money out of it. Nobody is doing it for professional reasons or whatever. So it's all volunteers, which I think is quite a nice feature. And we do it because we love the area and we love walking. And I think one of the other things, and again, I don't know whether it's unique to ours or not, is that we try to make sure that there's an event or a walk every evening. So if people who come from somewhere else come to stay here and they don't necessarily know anybody, that they do know there's a walk, or that there's a talk or a film or something on in the evening, so they needn't be feeling on their own or feeling lonely. What we do find is that for quite a few women, coming to a walking festival means that they can be walking with other people and have company, but also feel safe. They don't have to have planned out the walk because obviously the walk's planned. They don't have to be concerned overly about their safety in the outdoors because we've got walk leaders. The general thing about having walking festivals, obviously we think ours is the best, but walking festivals are a great idea to get to know different parts of the country, to get to know people from a different area, and also to feel safe walking in a group, knowing that you're being looked after because all the risk assessments have been done. Somebody else is leading the walk, but you can lean back on your walking poles and chat to people and have a really nice time and enjoy the cakes and hospitality of that area.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, and I'd never really thought of it that way before. I'd thought about the aspect of the safety of being in a group, but I think that thinking it forward from there, if you're in a group, maybe that's a way to meet people and start a group, or meet other people and say, well, do you want to go for a walk next weekend? And you end up with, instead of feeling the fear of walking on your own, maybe you meet a few people that have similar interests and live in a similar area, and it's maybe a good way to go to a festival to create another tiny group that you can carry forward.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because in Otley, after the first or the second walking festival, people did say, oh, it's a pity we haven't got a walking group just for Otley. And out of that, a walking group, Otley Walkers, was born. And that came out of the Otley Walking Festival. And also I've noticed over the years that friendships do develop and people do find people with similar outlook or wanting to do walks. So you might say to somebody, oh, I fancy doing a walk over so-and-so, and that they've met them on the festival and now they are out walking. So, yeah, I think festivals are great for that. You're in the outdoors. You've got beautiful scenery around you, particularly Otley and Wharfedale, I might add. And you've got good company. You've got a warm welcome. You've got good company. You get to meet people. You make friends. I think it's great.
If you've not been to Otley or the surrounding area, I would encourage you to try and get there. Going to Ilkley Moor and singing our unofficial national anthem is optional. When I lived in Canada, if I wanted to say something so no one could understand, I would talk in a Yorkshire dialect. Funnily enough, my first job was on the radio in Canada, and I did have a very strong Yorkshire accent, and people were calling the radio station, asking if the new person on the air could speak English. So I pretty quickly went with a generic English accent that then got a bit of a North American accent mixed in. Last week we had the interview about the Wrexham Walking Festival, and this week our second guest also has a connection to Wales, because she lives there. Ursula Martin's first book was entitled One Woman Walks Wales. It did very well, and she recently had a second book published called One Woman Walks Europe. At the beginning of this week, she started the Land's End to John O'Groats walk, calling in at bookstores along the way. So, clearly a very busy person, but she kindly took the time out of her very busy schedule, and we had a very enjoyable chat. I'm interested in what prompted you to write your first book. For some people, they haven't thought of it, and then everybody says, oh, you've got to write a book about that. Or some people, it's the exact opposite. They do things specifically to write a book.
Yeah, well, the first book was definitely not planned. It wasn't just about the walking. It was from the experience of having an ovarian cancer and then doing the walk as a response to that, walking to and from my hospital appointments, and then doing a symptoms awareness fundraising journey in Wales. So everything that I was doing in that time was about raising money for charity. And because I was keeping a blog and putting updates on social media, and, you know, it is that classic thing. Everyone says, oh, your writing is so good, you should write a book. And then, so I thought, well, yeah, all right, why not? And I think of anything, you know, it was such a complete story, you know, to have cancer and then to walk 3,700 miles. You just thought, if you can't write a book about that, you can't write a book about anything, because that was just such a jewel of a book, really, to be able to write.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with writing books as well is having something that is different. Was that the case when it came to trying to find a publisher for it?
I basically got 1-for-1 on the publisher front. So I was writing into a black hole, really, and I was kind of thinking, oh, I should try and find an agent. And it all felt very intimidating because I don't come from a professional writing background. I don't come from any kind of professional background, so I didn't have that framework of confidence to say, well, of course I'll go and get an agent and I'll find this publisher where I've got a friend who works there, or, you know, whatever. I didn't have that kind of network. And so I wrote a BBC Wales article, actually, and the journalist who helped me publish it said, why don't you try Hono, which is a very small Welsh women's press. And so I just sent them a message, and it turned out that they'd already tried to contact me. So I had a bit of a lucky connection, really, to just ask one publisher and then get a yes from them. And I was doing a writing course at that time. I went to do with Strenuous, the Welsh National Writing Centre. And I said to my tutors, I said, oh, I've had this one acceptance and it came really easily. Should I try for bigger? And they just went, no, in this market, in this industry, if you have one acceptance from a publisher, take it. And they just said, take it and publish the book. And so I did. Yeah, I did.
That first journey that you did that turned into a book, can you tell me a little bit about the journey itself and what you did and your approach to writing that? Because walking books can be diaries or they can be about people. What angle did you choose?
The first book was, in short, it was introduced by my cancer experience and then my realization that because I was traveling before I had cancer, I was house sitting in Bulgaria. I'd just kayaked the length of the River Danube. So I was living this very free life. And then the cancer kind of just changed completely for me. So I was living in rural Wales and I had this sequence of hospital appointments in Bristol to check that the cancer hadn't returned. And so I saw that I could walk down the River Severn from my home to Bristol to go to hospital and then home up the River Wye. And so that was the key seed that started the idea, which then grew into me adding more and more long distance paths in Wales. I ended up walking the length of 9 rivers, 2 mountain routes, the coast path, the Offers Dyke path, and I think the Cistercian Way, which was a 600-mile chunk. So I ended up walking 3,700 miles in Wales, and it was this crisscrossing around the country. And I was fundraising symptoms awareness for charity. And I think the style of my Welsh book compared to my English book, I think my Welsh book is a lot more naive, and it is more of a journey diary style, even though it's not laid out as day 1, day 10, day 300. All my writing is very much just what comes out of me. And I think the strength of my writing is very vivid, poetic nature descriptions. And so I was blogging along the way, and then I wrote the book, obviously, after the journey had finished. I think it's very easy for a book which is only focused on an adventure travel, like an endurance challenge experience, which a long distance walk is one example of. I think it's quite easy for them to be very boring if they are focused on, I did this, I did this, I did this, miles per day. And that's the thing, I think, that is really easy for these styles of books to become, is repetitive and very similar to all the other styles of books out there, because you're essentially dealing with bodily aches and pains and the mechanics of fueling a long distance endurance challenge. So food just becomes so important to the person, but is it necessarily as interesting to the reader? Because we both know that food takes on this phenomenal importance at the end of a day's walk, because it's like this huge prize, and all it is a cheese and ham sandwich, but it's the most tasty cheese and ham sandwich you've ever had, and you're so thankful to have it, and you're so happy to be sitting there under this tree having walked 15 miles, enjoying the fruits of your labor. And so it becomes this kind of beautiful, intense experience. And then you write in the book that you had a cheese and ham sandwich, and everyone's like, why are they banging on about this sandwich so much? This is ridiculous. And so you kind of have to watch that, maybe express it once, but don't express it over and over again. But I think the way that I wrote the Welsh book, I wasn't confident about being a travel writer. And also there's the cultural aspect of me being a culturally English person traveling in Wales, and Wales has had an awful lot of English people analysing them, and I don't think there is a place now for an English person to write a travel book about Wales. So I deliberately stayed away. And also there's the sense of I haven't been to university, I'm not qualified in any way. Who am I to have opinions about Wales? So in terms of like cultural and historical analysis of Wales, I deliberately steered clear of that. So it became a book about the people that I met. And again, the kindness of strangers is another kind of travel writing cliche that you have to steer clear of, as if you're discovering it for the first time, and everybody should know that actually you go out there and people are really nice after all. Again, that's something that has been repeated over and over again. But for me, that book, I do think my 2 books are quite different. And I think that my second book is more nuanced and developed as a writer than my first book. So my first book does have that kind of naive, I went out there, look at all these experiences. It was really hard, but it was great and I did it. But hopefully without too much of that diary, day by day exposition.
When you'd finished that first book, were you instantly thinking, I got to do another one? Or did it take a while? And then was it a case of, I'm looking for another adventure so I can write another book?
No, it wasn't that. So as I said, I'd been living in Bulgaria in a house sit and hitchhiked back to Britain for a Christmas visit and then found out I had cancer. And so, the cancer experience unfolded and the Welsh walk and book experience unfolded. So when I was coming to the end of the Welsh walk, there was this feeling of, where was I? What was I doing before this set of experiences kind of exploded into my life? And I was in Bulgaria and I had just kayaked east and I was planning to walk west. And so at that time, coming to the end of the Welsh walk, I knew that I wanted to walk across Europe. And then with the unfolding book and successful book of the walk around Wales, it just felt obvious that I would be writing another book about the Europe walk, but it was the desire to walk across Europe that came first. But then in that was a more kind of knowing approach to writing a book than the Welsh book, I think. So, it comes with the experience of being an established writer. So then you can think, well, how am I going to approach this Europe book and what story do I want to tell? Which was different to that more naive kind of, this is the Welsh journey, just blurt it all out and write it down type of thing.
Do you voice record as you're going or note things down? What's your approach to remembering the incidents?
So there were 3 different styles of writing that I did during the Europe journey. I would keep a daily diary, which would actually be quite boring because I was in my tent. I've just walked about 15 miles in the day and I'm just I'd write down my step count and where I went from and to, and then it always ended up being a very tired, very basic summary of the day. So it would be very hilly, climbed all morning, ate the last of my ham, like really kind of dull, really. Feet hurt. There'd always be something about what part of me was hurting each day. So there were useful things in there, but that wasn't the main source of my writing. So I would also, as I was walking and a little poetic kind of phrase or observation would come into my head, I'd write that down on my phone really quickly. And then I think the main backbone of the book was the blogging. So I would have a day off once a week and I would take time in my hotel room to just sit and write a blog. And so that was the creative writing flow, where I wouldn't really have an idea of what I wanted to write. I wouldn't be writing a summary of the week. I would just sit down and just go, okay. And then, maybe I'd just have a sentence and I'd start that sentence and then I would go where my mind took me, almost like free writing. But I knew I was writing a blog. But it would be that I wouldn't know what I was going to write about when I sat down to write. And so that free-form creative writing, which I was publishing weekly and sometimes fortnightly, that was my core writing practice, which became the backbone of the book.
How long did it take and how many miles did you do overall?
So the Europe walk took me 2 years and 9 months, and I covered roughly 5,500 miles. And that includes probably about 2 years of actual walking. And then there were 6 months of COVID lockdowns and some other smaller breaks kind of throughout those 2 years. Quite a long time. I'm not a fast walker. I'm just steady.
What were some of the highlights and lowlights, I guess, of the journey?
I think the lowlights were definitely the way that COVID affected the journey. The first lockdown I went into was 3 months long and I was incredibly isolated. I was in the south of France. Mentally, it was very hard to withstand my life was all about movement and being outside. And then in those lockdowns, I couldn't do either of those. And I was the uncertainty that COVID added into the journey, which is already a very uncertain thing in itself. You're walking across land and you're finding places to camp. I would walk not knowing where I was going to sleep that night. And I was already in that level of uncertainty and coping with it. And somehow COVID just added this complete kind of ethical minefield about whether I should be doing it at all and what was the right thing to do next. Whenever a lockdown threatened or restrictions were kind of crowding around me in different ways, so many people can meet at this time, or bars are closed, or you can sit at tables but not at the bar, all these kind of different things, because I walked through Italy and France and Spain during that COVID experience. So there'd be all these competing restrictions in different regions, and it was very hard. It was very, very hard. And that's on top of the challenges of a long distance walk. I think the highlights were, getting to Finisterre was incredible, because I walked all the way down to the tip of the peninsula at Finisterre, which is on the west coast of Spain, and to see the Atlantic Ocean open up and the sun was setting, very romantic, and to see the water and to have that feeling that I just walked there from Kiev, and this feeling of being an arrow kind of fixed on this point, always walking west for, what had been 2.25 years at that point, maybe even 2.5, and to have that fix and to arrive at that end point where it all opened out in front of me was a brilliant feeling. There were high points every day, because being alone outside in nature, I could say that sitting in a forest in Serbia and hearing sticks cracking behind me and kind of looking but not really seeing anything about what it was, and then realizing that there was a tortoise in the undergrowth, about 10 meters away from me, and it was just slowly going about its business. That's a highlight. There were highlights like that every single day, and that's what's so wonderful to me about long distance walking.
How is it going, the book, so far?
It's going well. I've been doing a book tour, and it's, funnily enough, I do think the Europe book is a better book, but it hasn't had as much publicity as the Wales book, because I think the Wales book had that kind of local interest sense, whereas the Europe book has gone into something larger in scale, but then it gets lost in the big, large scale journeys. But yeah, it's going well.
What's the book tour that you're doing?
Again, it was the idea for the journey. I realised that I've walked about 9,300 miles in the two journeys, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to get to 10,000? So I thought I could walk Land's End to John O'Groats. And then it came that I hadn't managed to do it while I was writing the book. So I thought, well, I'll do it as a book tour. And my publisher said, well, why don't you do a Welsh loop? So in the end, I'm walking 1,700 miles. So it's going to be 11,000 miles when I get to John O'Groats. And I'm going bookshop to bookshop, and I'm giving talks and signings along the way. So I've completed the Welsh section, which was about 380 miles. And then on Monday, actually, I'm heading to Land's End to start walking north to John O'Groats. So there'll be talks throughout the UK, really. It's been very small and very sweet and very nice. And especially because as I've done the Welsh section, I'm revisiting places I haven't been to for 10 years since I walked there last. And I've met lots of people who met me along the Welsh route, and people have come out to the talks and also had me to stay. And that's just been a really nice part of it. I've been revisiting, really, in a way, that some parts of the Welsh book, and it's been a lovely beginning to it. And then the Land's End John O'Groats is a lot more kind of unknown territory for me. So that'll be another different experience.
Is that another book or not?
I doubt it. I don't think I would have anything original to say.
Yeah. Are you going to do more walking books?
I don't think so. I think I will write more books, but I think I'm a writer who walks rather than a walker who writes. And so I do want to write more books, but no, not about the walking challenges. I think I'll be lucky if I can get to 11,000 miles, and I think that feels like a nice line to draw underneath it.
How long are you anticipating it's going to take?
Well, I'm being very slow about it. I do have some lower back pain that has meant I'm not walking as far, so I've kept it to a 10 miles a day schedule. And very unusually for me, I've worked the whole journey out in advance so that I can tell bookshops where I'm going to be on what date. And so I already know that I have a talk in Orkney Library on the 8th of October. So all the way through the whole of the next 5 months, I will walk 10 miles a day on average with a few days off. I know I'm going to be in Edinburgh on the 31st of August, for example. It's so unlike me, because normally I just walk as far as I can every day and keep it so vague, and that suits me. And that was another reason to keep the shorter distances, so to make sure that I can keep up with the schedule and not be arriving at bookshops, be 6 p.m. and I'm supposed to be giving a talk at 7 p.m. and I'm still 5 miles away. That kind of, I don't really want that to happen. So I've kept it very, very slow and steady, and I think that'll suit me.
If you'd like to buy a copy of Ursula's book, One Woman Walks Europe, it's available now from Honno Welsh Women's Press, and currently on Amazon it's on special for £11.45, regular £12.99, although maybe that's a special deal for Prime members, who knows. Still, definitely well worth a read if you love books about walking. Actually, while you're at it, you might as well get her other book as well. So that's it for this week's podcast. We have a good show for you next week as well, but I would say that. This weekend it's the Eurovision Song Contest, which in my opinion has never been the same without Terry Wogan. I missed out on seeing it for a long time when I didn't live in Europe, and to be honest I've no idea why I still watch it, because probably the last time I enjoyed a song on it was about 1980. The weather is still warm here in this little Scottish microclimate, so I'm guessing we'll be out filming again this weekend, which means I will likely spend the rest of today charging things. Okay, we'll be back next week. I hope you enjoyed this week's walkingpost.com podcast, and I hope that you have a great week, hopefully with a walk somewhere. Don't forget your hat and water if it's hot. Until next time, happy trails. Walking Post from walkingpost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.